The Flock, The Autobiography of a Multiple Personality by Joan Frances Casey with Lynn Wilson. A testimony to her own courage and the dedication of her therapist, who believed that a profoundly fragmented self has the capacity to heal within a loving therapeutic relationship. From the New York Times Book Review. A quote from Andrew Vachss. A remarkable book, totally honest and compelling. A ground zero look at one of the most frightening outcomes of child abuse. This is the real thing. When, as a 26-year-old married graduate student, Joan Frances Casey awoke on the ledge of a building ready to jump. She did not know how she had gotten there, and it wasn't the first time she had blanked out. This time she thought she would give therapy another try. After only a few sessions, Lynn Wilson, an experienced psychiatric social worker, was shocked to discover that Joan had MPD, multiple personality disorder. Dissociative identity disorder is the current day's terminology. And as she came to know Joan's distinct selves, Lynn uncovered a nightmarish pattern of emotional and physical abuse, including rape and incest, that nearly succeeded in smothering the artistic and intellectual gifts of this amazing young woman. In an extraordinary move that challenged the medical establishment, many of whom believe MPD does not exist, Lynn embarked on a radical program of re-parenting therapy to bring out and individually treat Joan's 24 separate personalities. Missy, the 5-year-old artist. Joe, the scholar. Rusty, the motherless boy. Renee, the people pleaser. Josie, the self-destructive toddler. Joan Frances, the perfect one, and all the other deeply scarred members of the flock that had been helping Joan Frances Casey function despite tremendous psychic pain since she was a child. Written by the woman who lived it and the therapist who helped her become whole, The Flock is an intense and enlightening view inside the fractured mind of a multiple personality. A quote from the Detroit News. This is the first coherent autobiographical study of its kind, and it is absolutely mesmerizing, simply not to be missed. Got a few more quotes here. An excellent book. It states the disorder with understanding and gives a clear indication of what being a multiple is like, from Cornelia B. Wilbur, MD, real-life psychiatrist, to Sybil. Because Sybil's actually the person with the thingy. Joan Frances is one of the alters that writes this book. The Flock is written in direct and clear style and helps to clarify the genesis and development of a disorder that is still looked on with skepticism by some psychologists. That's the New York Times Book Review. From the New York Woman. Like Sybil, Casey is a smart, admirable woman, and that is what makes The Flock positively, intensely transfixing. From the Publishers Weekly. An extraordinary, convincing account of her psychological fragmentation and arduous journey towards wholeness. Deftly told and studied with striking images, distinguished by Casey's intelligence and courage, by Wilson's unremitting patience and compassion. The last quote from the Kirkus Reviews. A compelling psychological odyssey offering unique insights into a nightmare world. The Flock, Joan Frances Casey with Lynn Wilson. This book is many things. This is the prologue. This book is many things. It is the story of a child who was badly hurt, but survived. It is the story of a young woman who had many personalities and became one. It is also the story of how one therapist treated one patient. Most of all, however, it is the story of people who found each other at the right moment in their lives and performed magic. It's about 2 women who changed each other and about 3 people who became a family. It is neither a manual nor a definitive statement of what ought to be done to treat multiple personality disorder. It is an account of what Joan and I did and how it worked. A therapist more experienced with multiples might have treated Joan differently and much more efficiently. But then, as I have learned to my sorrow, many clinicians might not have seen what was there to be treated, no matter how flamboyantly presented. What happened between Joan and me was a product of the time, the place, and the people the two of us had become when we met. A year or two earlier or later, I might not have been able to respond to Joan's need. A year or two either way, Joan might have been dead or might have been strong enough to use me as she had used other therapists to bury her problems further. When I first met Joan on a snowy March day in 1981, I was approaching a transition in my life. My daughter Lisa, youngest of 5, was finishing her final year at home. For the first time in 30 years, I would have no children living with me. For the first time in our 17 years of marriage, my second husband, Gordon, and I would be alone together. I knew I'd miss Lisa. By the time she was born, 5 years after her nearest sibling, Victor, I had relaxed enough about mothering to enjoy her completely without worrying much about how she would turn out. Lisa had found it easy to confide in me, and we'd spent joyful hours walking along the lake near our weekend cottage, talking about politics and about her hopes for the future. There were no younger children demanding my attention, so I had the time and energy to develop a personally gratifying relationship. Not only with a daughter, but with a delightful person. As much as I wanted Lisa to grow up and build her own life, I knew her departure would leave a gap. Yet, I felt a secret happiness at the prospect of not having her around. I was excited by the idea of being a spouse rather than a mother, of being able to make plans just for Gordon and me. Now, we could spend hours or even days sailing. Gordon had a special love of the water and of his boats, a 30-foot Catalina named the Channel and a 15-foot O'Day that he called Mantra. Some of the children grew to appreciate the beauty and solitude of being on the water. But I was often too distracted by some family or professional crisis to go out for a sail or to enjoy it when I did. Now I'd have the time. The stack of books I had waiting to be read was 2 feet high, in anticipation of lazy hours on Lake Michigan. I had divided the stack in half, one for reading in bed, the other on the water. I wanted also to do some work on the house that had been occupied by kids, cats and dogs for so many years. I thought I might even get back to singing in a choir. My career as a clinical social worker was gratifying too, and my job had changed recently in a way that promised growth. After 16 years of doing both fieldwork and psychotherapy, I had become a member of a new whole patient and unit attached to the I'd become a member of a new whole patient unit attached to the local university and teaching hospital. This outpatient unit was designed to serve as an interdisciplinary training ground for members of the medical and ancillary professions. I enjoyed working with both students and community people, and I welcomed being able to teach as well. My colleagues were enthusiastic about the concept of treating a whole person and concentrating on wellness rather than disease. The mix of doctors, nurse clinicians, and social workers collaborating for the good of patients generated new and challenging ideas. But the programme was slow in getting started. Not all the doctors were thrilled with interdisciplinary treatment, and some were resistant. Referrals were scarce and sometimes inappropriate. Although I worked hard to show the doctors how useful a social worker could be in patient care, I was not as busy as I would have liked. The first time Joan called me, it was easy for me to respond to her apparent desperation with an immediate appointment, and equally easy to schedule additional sessions as the complexity of her problem became obvious. This is a rare situation for most clinicians. In the years that have passed since I met Joan, many things have changed. I know that if Joan were approaching me for the first time now, I would respond to her differently. The bureaucratic structure has changed, and I have more administrative duties. I'm also treating other multiples and have begun supervising a colleague who is treating them. The two of us are conducting group therapy sessions for adults who were molested as children. Most of these are people who suffer from multiple personality disorder. Sheer numbers, if nothing else, have forced me to find other ways of treating MPD than those I used with Joan. And as my understanding of and competence in treating the disorder have grown, multiple personality has come to seem, though still horrendous, less unique and incomprehensible, and thus more manageable. 6 years ago, treating one multiple was unsettling enough to me. Now, I can treat several at once, because of what I learned from Joan. I have also found that both therapists and patients benefit from cutting down on the mystique and the feelings of isolated strangeness that so often accompany the disorder. I must emphasize that I am not apologizing for my approach to treating Joan. Despite the reparenting style of treatment described in this book, I was not over-involved, nor did I experience messianic countertransference, as some of the clinical literature would suggest. I have often tried to imagine how I might have acted differently. Always, I end up in the same place. For us at that time, it was the only way to treat my first multiple as to raise my first child. I had to commit myself deeply to the experience in order to tolerate the uncertainty, fear, pain, and intensity. With Joan, I came close to burnout over and over again, but was continually rescued by the depth of my caring. Treating Joan changed me and my life. It confirmed deeply felt values, sharpened my awareness, honed my perceptions, and gave me a sense of confidence about my skills and abilities that is reflected both in my work and in my being. It remains a priceless gift. As I write this, I think how remarkable it is that I now feel so clear about the connection Joan and I made. The relationship that weaves like a shining thread through all the pain and confusion that existed for so long. It is this honest connection between two human beings that, in the end, makes what we endure together understandable and meaningful. To me, the essential task of any therapy is the same as that of life: to recognize, experience, and affirm our common humanity as we integrate within, with one another, and with the universe around. From Lynn Wilson, June 1988. Author's note: I had multiple personalities from infancy until I was almost 30 years old. My sense of identity changed drastically as I began to accept my diagnosis. And progressed through successful treatment. Even my ability to say I in a self-referential way is a relatively new experience for me. I have been integrated well for 6 years. Before my integration, I meant at various times any of 24 personalities. It's a confusing way to live, and with 24 points of view, a confusing tale to tell. My story is told here through the perspective of one major, growing and changing personality, a personality who called herself Renee. So I got it wrong. I said it was written by Joan Frances personality, but it's written by Renee, a personality, but Joan Frances on the cover. So yeah, we're going to start chapter 1, but I'm not going to start it on this one. I'll start it on the next one. So have a wonderful day, beautiful people. And a second one.